look at risk registers, it used to become quite a tedious task when I was living and working on live construction projects on a daily basis. I thought the risk register was great because it was an opportunity register, I saw it as. What opportunities have we got? No, never mind the risks. Where there's a risk, there's an opportunity. Surely, there's an opposite. So we used it more in, let's try and maximise the value of that risk register. Let's make some opportunities throughout it. And it's always very difficult when you're asking a team, a project manager. It's very easy to give negatives, but actually, what's our opportunity here? What can we, make more money on?
Hello, everybody. Gavin Kyle. I'm the Gaffer back again, and I have another intelligent person who's going to tell us how to navigate the risks of construction and how to get around or how to deal with commercial risks within the business from a financial point of view, from a mediation point of view, from a collaboration point of view, from a culture point of view, and all of the bits in the middle that helps you put models in your business so that you can protect yourself, or at least have some level of protection for when something goes wrong, i.e. somebody doesn't pay you, there's a dispute, or there is something that has happened on site that requires a handbrake. And rather than hitting the reactive button, this guy has got the proactive intelligence to tell us how to deal with these issues. He's founding partner, of Overford Limited, which is a specialist legally trained quantity surveyor member business, which helps construction owners with all of the stuff that we always talk about on the podcast that causes us sleepless nights. And obviously, we want to protect our families, we want to protect the mortgages, any debts. We want to have a sustainable product, obviously the construction business being your product, and we want to maintain that so that you don't have to have these car crash moments like what's happening at the moment with a number of companies going into receivership, administration, or just simply vanished from the earth because of poor governance and all the rest. So I'm really looking forward to today's conversation because Guy has a massive amount of experience built up over his career, and I'm sure we'll get in underneath that. And for that, Guy Jackson, it is an absolute pleasure to have you on I'm The Gaffer.
Thanks for having me, Gavin.
No problem. It's a delight to have you, and you're a man of few words, but when you look at your profile, it's kind of yeah, you probably need about 3 or 4 pages on LinkedIn just to get through your profile. But can you give us a condensed version of your career in such a way that we don't have to do a second podcast?
So in summary, I'm a commercial manager, trained as a quantity surveyor back in the day. It seems like a lifetime ago. But I was the type of quantity surveyor that'd like to get the contract out on top of the desk, have a look at the rules of engagement. And so I suppose over time, I became more interested in the construction law aspect of the business. What are these agreements we're getting into as a company? What am I being asked to do as a commercial manager on site? What are the rules of engagement? And so that led me to, obviously I did my BSc in commercial management, did a master's in construction law and covering all forms of dispute resolution, mediation, arbitration, adjudication. I've taken mediation a step further, become trained mediator with Centre of Effective Dispute Resolution. And I've also become a panel adjudicator on construction panels with the RICS, UK adjudicators, chartered industry arbitrators, a number of other panels as well. And so now my time is split between resolving disputes and also providing advisory services more throughout the currency of projects to help avoid the disputes.
Yeah, which is obviously a body of work in itself. I'd be interested to know what are the common themes that you see in terms of your mediation experience? Because can you give us some understanding of the type of trends that you see are happening? Obviously, the broad trend is obviously the contract, and there's a dispute over the contract, and one person's version of the contract was one thing and the other person's version was another thing. But is there any sort of commonality themes that you see that are kind of like, I suppose, tripwires, if you want to call them tripwires, where people have inserted stuff into contracts, knowing that, if they did have to pull the shutters down, that they could rely on that clause, and it's an unreasonable clause, but it's used to the advantage of the contractor.
I suppose without going into too much detail on the technical aspect, it's when companies, businesses enter into contracts, my experience is that the courts would not try and get involved in amending or rectifying those contracts to make them fairer. There's an old saying, if you enter into a bad bargain, it's still a bad bargain, and nobody's going to rectify that for you. The tripwires which you commonly see is probably condition precedents, where there's a strict requirement to do something, probably by a certain date or within a certain time frame, and if you don't, then there's consequences that flow from that condition precedent. However, in my experience, the application or enforcement of condition precedents depends on the conduct of the parties as to how they've acted throughout the project. So whilst the condition precedent can be a tripwire, it can also not be enforceable due to the conduct of the parties. So I think we've got to be really careful of how we do conduct ourselves throughout the projects. That would be one of the early pieces of advice which I'd give to any client. Communicate openly with your client at all times. And if there is a whiff of an issue, again, address the matter early, carry out some due diligence, maybe do a bit further research into where they think this is going. There could be other issues outside of the project which could also be putting pressure on the funding of that particular project.
Yeah, like as you're talking there, I'm thinking about, I've seen site foremen, contracts managers, project directors, and they're very defensive, and they take it personal that, they may have agreed to something verbally, and then, they're taking an honour and trust that it was agreed on both sides without having to put a written sort of piece of paper on the table between both parties, so that the work they just crack on and get the work done. And then when it comes to sort of like, well, no, I didn't say that, people get very personal at that point. And I've seen, people going into emails and sending something in the time of emotion, when it might be better off just taking a rain check for 24 hours or even going home and saying, look, you know what, I'm just going to go home. I'm going to go home I'm going to sleep on this until tomorrow. But they don't, because the fast nature of construction, they think they have to deal with it there and then. And in one sense, you could say that the other party acted in such a way that they wanted to provoke an emotive response, so that they could say, well, this guy's a bit of a bully and he's a bit of a loudmouth, or she's a bit of a loudmouth, or whatever, and we want them off the job. So now they get the task done for nothing, plus they get your man removed or your one removed from the job. And it's a win-win. I'm not saying that all contracts are like that, but aside from maybe the other party trying to set that up, which I don't really suspect that everyone's like that, but I do have experience, and I've seen it down through the years, of people just going and hitting the nuclear button, and it actually makes things worse. And have you seen experience of that as well, in terms of how that plays itself out?
Yeah, I suppose one of the, I come back to the communication piece, trying to keep all the stakeholders engaged and openly communicated with can be tricky, as you said, when somebody's committed to something and then all of a sudden they renege on that commitment. Or alternatively, somebody disappears from a project who had already made that agreement.
Yeah.
And then there's no records to fall back upon to say, well, actually, this was said at this time, or this did happen. It's trying to strike a balance between not being seen to be overly contractual, but protecting your position. And it's one of the things I struggled with in my career as a commercial manager. How do you strike that balance? You mentioned about draft emails. I've got a lot of draft emails that have never been sent.
I don't know. In this day and age, would you not think, or I'm not putting words in your mouth, but would you not say that maybe it's more professional to produce a day works book or whatever it is, or a minutes of a meeting document that said, you said, I said, we agreed, I will, it's done, kind of, documentation. It doesn't have to be too formal. I think people get this bias in your system. Exactly what you just discussed there is that you feel that if you come down with a formal sort of email at 9:20, you instructed me to do X, Y, Z, as opposed to some sort of less in your face presented document. It's down to communication, 100% down to communication. But I do feel that the clients, whether a tier one client or whether it's the end user client, will actually feel that this is a more professional structure, because this person has systems and processes, that shows the maturity of that company.
Oh yeah, you could ask a question as well, couldn't you? When is bad news best delivered?
Yeah, great step.
As soon as possible.
Yeah,
because at least you can own the problem or the issue. You can maybe make it part of somebody else's problem to deal with. I make it a project issue.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, if there is an issue that's going to affect your contractor, well, that'll impact upon your employer. That will impact upon his reporting to his funder or her funder. There's the ramifications of the issue. And it's reminding people of that, because it's quite easy to try and pass the buck. Oh, we've got these conditions in our main contract. We're just stepping down to our subbies, and then it's our subbies' problem. So if we don't do something, or we're in breach, we'll just blame a subcontractor, and then that subcontractor may be blaming a subcontractor. So we're probably used to, over the years, passing that responsibility rather than owning the issue and seeing how best we can work a resolution to it.
And now I'm also thinking about, not everybody has the luxury of a QS on their team on a full-time basis. And then you might have the owner of the business making decisions off the fly, but he's not, or she's not being held accountable for the decisions that they're making. And I think a lot of the audience that would probably listen to this podcast would be in that bracket where, they're the admin, they're the business developments, they're the commercial director, they're, procurement, they're safety, they're everything. And maybe the QS only comes in once every 2 weeks or once a month to do any evaluations and stuff like that. So, is there some sort of models you could talk to us about how how people should piece that bit together so that, there is the accountability that, even if I'm the CEO of the business, I cannot make decisions off the fly just for the sake of thinking, I trust this customer and I want to keep the job going.
Well, I think that probably comes from the CEO as to how he wants some of his projects.
Yeah.
You've got to set the projects up in the right way, haven't you, with the right intention to deliver a scheme in accordance with the contract.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, which, we've got to remember, most contracts are negotiated far away from the project team.
Yeah.
One of my clients, I'm part of the commercial team or the project team that helps to negotiate the contract. So we're fully embedded as a squad.
Yeah.
In that process. Because
you take ownership for that as well.
Absolutely. I take ownership for the commercial aspects, but the practicalities of delivering is, the responsibility of the project management team. However, there is a collective responsibility because the project delivery goes hand in hand with the finances and the health and safety aspects. So I think if CEOs run around making decisions, if I was part of the project team, I'd be making sure that we've given the advice to the CEO in some shape or form, i.e. through some reporting mechanism, so at least he can be informed when making those on-the-fly decisions. What you can't do is control the head of the business making such decisions.
Yeah.
And I've experienced it as a site QS, where I did my job and the managing director made a completely different decision. But that was up to them at that point. Yeah. And there was wider business considerations, which I understood throughout, my career, and expanding on my experience and becoming more experienced in project delivery.
But does it not beggar the question then that, CEOs, when they don't have a commercial director, because they don't have the capacity to employ a commercial director, that they need to have somebody on their right-hand side or left-hand side that is holding them accountable. And a lot of these guys get into an isolated sort of model where they're making decisions off the fly, and they kind of have, I can just see it myself, they kind of have this sense of judgment that's only going to cost about $5,000. I can take that because I'll have X amount of people and it'll only take a couple of days to do that job and I'll be out the gap. And it's kind of like, it's like literally in nanoseconds they make that decision that, I'm going to lose a bit of money, but I'll get it somewhere else. And then it becomes another thing the following week or the following month, whatever else. I'm just thinking, really it's, as you said, it's sticking in my head. Like, if the CEO of the business is not taking the accountability of themselves into consideration to run a construction project, that they should have somebody that's on their, peace of mind board, if you like. It could be their wife, it could be your partner, it could be anybody, it could be, brother, sister, uncle. It doesn't have to, like, you don't have to be a big tier 1, tier 2 company. I'm talking about, small to medium independent contractors that are the ones that are going bust on a regular basis. They need to have that sort of, hey, why did you make that decision this week? Kind of chat. And then if they rationalize it to the point that you've just rationalized that managing director making that decision, well, then it's fine. But the problem is, you're going to hear people screaming at the screen or into their phones at the moment, is that, there is no, you probably don't know that person has made that decision, and it's not shared with the team.
Again, that comes down to how you communicate probably as a team, upstream, downstream. There is, hundreds of thousands of companies out there that don't have that person that just says, well, hang on a minute, have you thought about this? Have you thought about that?
Yeah.
But conversely, you do get owners of businesses who don't want to hear the negative because they're interested in driving turnover or getting to the next project or, whatever. And they don't want the negativity around their decision making. But there is ways you can provide subtle advice without telling somebody what they should be doing.
Yeah. There's no point in having all these fancy systems and processes and maybe having people coming in and implement an ISO into your system, and then the managing director goes in and says, no, we'll do that, that's fine, don't worry about it, we'll get it done. What's the point?
Well, that's it. There's also no point having systems that you use as tick box either, just to meet a pre-qualification questionnaire or some other requisite. You must have this system in place. It's one of the things in our business we started with. We implemented ISO 9001 day one. Yeah. I said, our business isn't going to use ISO 9001 as a tick box exercise. We're going to use it as a management tool.
Yeah.
And that's what we do.
Yeah, same here. We did it in our own business, and it was like pulling teeth, trying to get me to the table to agree to a lot of the stuff that we had to agree to. And I was like, what? I'm sorry. I'm nearly sorry I signed up to this whole management system. But then when it was done, everyone in the company went, yeah, we can put our hand to exactly what we do, and it's exactly the way it is. And then obviously you have your independent auditors who come in and challenge that every year or whatever, yourself. And then they go, oh, geez, I never thought of that. And one of the big things for me was the business risk register. And I'm not saying that everybody needs to go out and get ISO, but Jesus, as a sort of basic document to have a business risk register for the business of what are the threats and what are the opportunities and what are the controls and what are, the theories of if something goes wrong, i.e. if the managing director is making all the decisions within the business and that managing director goes sick, who's picking up the pieces and who's carrying forward the conversations? And it reminds me of a roofing contractor who had a catastrophic injury on a job, and nobody knew where the payments were. Nobody knew what the conversations were, and checks didn't come in. You'd think people would actually pay up and say, oh my God, he's in hospital suffering and trying to survive for his life. The checks didn't come in that were due, but nobody knew what checks were due and what checks weren't due. Now, you can go down and say, right, you hadn't got a solid accounts management system in, whatever. But, having your head stuck in the business is not a good thing. And I think when you have the business risk register, it's kind of pulls you back and kind of say to yourself, well, what if, and what are we going to do? And again, at least if it's your wife that has to step into the business, someone can say, here's the business register, your name is on it, and here's the blueprint for what we need you to do just to steady the ship for the time being. And you know what I mean? And it's kind of it's a contingency plan, 100%. But we talk a lot in the podcast about framework agreements and about contract law. I need to go back just to the business risk register and the contingency plan for the business as a starting point, and then that will feed the culture into the contracts.
Yeah, I mean, you go back, you look at risk registers. It used to become quite a tedious task when I was actually on, living and working on live construction projects on a daily basis. I thought the risk register was great because it was an opportunity register. I saw it as. What opportunities have we got? No, never mind the risks. Where there's a risk, there's an opportunity. Surely,
100%.
There's an opposite. So we used it more in, let's try and maximise the value of that risk register. Let's make some opportunities throughout it. And it's always very difficult when you're asking a team, a project manager. It's very easy to give negatives. But actually, what's our opportunity here? What can we make more money on?
And it could be implementing a piece of software that takes the decision away that you don't have to employ somebody in the administration role. And we say, look, no, I'll tell you what we'll do. There's a piece of software for that. So we'll use that instead of having to pay $40,000 a year or $35,000 a year for an administrator for that particular task. And there's so many opportunities, as you say, that you can actually delve into within the whole business structure of a business that can benefit the business. And then when things go wrong, at least you haven't got, when I talk about things going wrong, maybe what I'm thinking of is when there's a downturn and there's less work. You're not in a position where you're spending most of your time trying to pick up work or sack people or let people go, which is kind of just chaos.
Yeah, I suppose that's having vision, isn't it? And delivering vision to your teams and your staff. This is our sort of direction of travel. This is where we're heading over the next 5 years.
Yeah.
But just because you've delivered a plan and you say this is what we're doing for the next 5 years doesn't mean you don't revisit it every 6 months because
100%.
As we know, the construction industry can change daily.
Yeah.
And I will say any bad news story in the construction industry, whether it's from a modular contractor going bust, a tier one going bust, it's bad news for the whole industry.
Yeah.
And for the person on the street, they just see bad news, construction again.
Yeah. Without mentioning names, but we all know we're in October now, and one big whale, if you like, went bust recently, and it's taken down a lot of contractors. And when me and you were having the pre-chat, you were like, yeah, the industry kind of knew that they were going to go, and I was like, did they? And I was like, yeah. That intrigues me. The industry does have a sense of companies that are on the verge, or you kind of say to yourself, this doesn't add up. This whole thing just doesn't seem right. Would you agree with that? Or you just have that sort of gut feeling, don't you?
Yeah, and I can't remember if it's the whale that had the 120-day payment terms, but there was a contractor that had 120-day payment terms, and you sign up to that contract. But if you want to get paid within 90 days, you have to give some money back.
Stop.
And if you want your money in 60 days, you have to give even more money back.
Come on. Like a rebate?
Yeah.
And that was in the contract?
I'm not sure if it's written in the contract as that, but the payment terms, somebody, explained to me, were 120 days, and you can get your money back sooner, but you'll have to give some money back.
What?
To get you, and 120 days, I can't imagine who can, it's very difficult to survive cash flow in 120 days for any organisation.
Yeah. It's going to sound stupid, but you're nearly better off opening a coffee shop. At least you know that the person that's coming in through the door is going to take out their card and go to the point of sale and put the card onto the point of sale and pay for the coffee and the sandwich or whatever else. And at least you know that money's banked in your system today in real time. And if something goes wrong, it's a couple of things. It's either you pick the bad location, you don't have nice coffee and sandwiches, and you don't know how to mind your cash. Whereas, as you say, in the construction side of things, if you're 120 days, that's a lot of coffee, tea, sandwiches, and everything else that goes on hold, on tap. Like, it's ridiculous. Like, we get drawn into, I think because business owners are entrepreneurs in their own right, and they have this one attribute that I know I've seen with them all is they're very positive, motivated people that tend to look at the bright side of life going in, and everything is rosy in the garden. And I think, we always painted the accountant as being the dull, grim reaper that, stopped progression and progress.
Always, still do.
And QSs, I think,
apologies to the accountants.
Sorry.
Yeah, QSs, yeah. They're project managers. They stop project managers building the QSs, I think.
They kill the buzz.
Yeah. Why is it always about money? Well,
but it's a necessary evil, though, isn't it? And like like the timing of you coming on the podcast and your background and that whale in the UK collapse and catastrophic collapse, by the way, and shout out to all the poor people that are in trouble because of them, and we hope you can recover in some way, shape, or form and get back on the feet. It's devastating. Like, it's carnage, isn't it?
Unfortunately, it probably has been coming. It's just I like to think putting the positive hat on, it creates opportunities on projects, because projects still need to be delivered.
Yeah.
It probably needs employers to step up and take some of the risk, because when we break it all down through the construction chain, it's the employers who want to build the project to make some money at the outset. They're the ones who borrow the money from a funder. They don't spend their own money, in my experience. So it's time for them guys to step up and probably start to share some risk rather than just passing it down to your big contractor, who then passes it down to his supply chain, and then it's all that risk is dissolved through the supply chain.
Yeah. But it does just go to show you how fragmented the supply chains are, that loyalty and honest and trust can evaporate very quickly when it comes to am I going to get paid? Are you going to get paid? Well, I can tell you I'm going to get paid. So I don't know about you, and I liked working with you, but as far as I'm concerned, I'm a little bit above the ladder, above you. So I'm going to take the check first, which is the unfortunate part. The further down the food chain you are, the more risk that you are.
Yeah, and there has been some tier 2, tier 1 main contractors stepping up. I've seen across social media, asking for companies affected by the fallout to get in touch if they're owed any money on their projects, and see if there's anything that they can do to help the situation. Because ultimately, the supply chain is probably the most important thing. But forget tier 1 contractors.
Yeah,
they're management machines.
100%.
It's all about delivery on site.
Yeah.
So the supply chain is absolutely crucial.
So talk to me, Guy, about simple wins for contractors going into a contract. Like, that's number one. But number two, I know that there is certain tools and certain mediation processes that can be implemented that protects both from a contract point of view. So, number one, going into a contract, just give me a basic version of how you should have your eyes and ears open. And it's not, I don't want something from a point of view of, be communicative, have loads of communication, because you can have all the communication you want, but if you go in and you're not protected, with the proper processes and systems or whatever that is, what would you say is the sort of the dummy guide to taking on a contract that protects yourself? The Guy Jackson dummy guide, by the way.
It could depend on what type of company you are, but I'm surprised. So if we go number one, I'm surprised how many times due diligence is not carried out on the client or who you're getting into contract with, which is basic credit checking. And I know credit checking is probably a year out of date, but that still doesn't happen.
Yeah.
So there's basic credit checking. There's understanding your own company's risks, i.e. your red lines, what you want going into a negotiation and what you're not prepared to move on. I think they're very important.
Yeah.
That, to me, sets a framework of how you're going to negotiate a contract. And then,
what about materials?
In terms of materials, well, again, that's about due diligence, isn't it? At the outset, you want to know your market rates, your prices. You're checking for any fluctuations. You need a basic appraisal of the timescales for the delivery of the project.
Yeah.
Because a negotiation could go on for a couple of years before it even hits the site. Yeah. And once there's a number being cast, that number's the number. Then we're looking at value engineering.
The other thing that I hear a lot of people is the retention, and you just kind of alluded to it there. Waiting for the final payment and the terms on the way out that everything is subject to and in respect of, as opposed to, here, where's my bloody check? Again, back to what you're saying, it, depending on the size of the company and the capacity of the company, maybe some companies should say, no, I actually can't deal with that exit clause.
And that's it. You mentioned materials there. Depending what type of work you're actually carrying out, could lead to advance payment for materials. Because at the end of the day, if the employer buys the materials through the contractor, through the subcontractor, and has ownership of those materials, it doesn't really matter where that money sort of sits, as long as the materials are secured at a price. But setting the framework up for the negotiation, like I say, the red lines, understanding what your payment terms are and where you're prepared to move, how much retention you're prepared to give away, if any, the rules on release of that retention.
What about labour? So another common thing is you haven't enough labour on this job, and some people think that by throwing loads more labour on the job that it automatically gets the job done, and the reality is, in 9 times out of 10, throwing more labour actually makes it worse, because you just have more bodies to manage and they're running around, whereas the core focus of the guys that you had built from day one are the ones that you should stick with. But there does come the pressure of, you need more guys here, you haven't got enough, you're too thin on the ground, you can't keep up.
But when statements like that are made, I very rarely see any justification as to why we need more labour. And more often than not, I'm not here to bash the main contractor, but it's coming from somebody within the main contracting organisation who's not a specialist in putting cladding on a building, or mechanical and electrical, or flooring, or, I can name hundreds of trades. And they're just saying, just chuck more labour at it. Well, that's not the solution necessarily, because it's getting the right labour with the right skills that can be efficient to deliver. And obviously we know there is a shortage of skills in the market.
Yeah. But I do hear people saying, okay, fair enough, you're holding up the electrician, so I'm going to countercharge you because the electrician has to wait for you to catch up. Like, how do you respond to that? Like,
Well, for a start off, I'd want the contractor to prove that, they've not delayed my work, which means I'm not delaying, the M&E contractor or whatever. So one of the things, you've held us up, we're going to contract. Well, hang on, how have we held you up? A lot of the times it's statements made out of context, not necessarily looking at a program. And I'm not an advocate for being a robot in terms of managing every line of a program, because a program is an intention, as I see it. It's not a prescriptive way of delivering a project. It's a movable. It's a movable
dynamic document.
It is. It should be, and that's how it should be used. It's you look at the JCT. That doesn't ask for a program at the outset. It gives you a duration to complete your works, and then we start introducing programs, and they soon get outdated. Once somebody actually starts to work through the sequence and looks at alternative ways of delivering the project that might be more efficient. So I think, for anyone listening, when somebody says, bring more labour to site, well, I'd probably just ask why. Why? What's your justification for me to bring more labour to site?
Yeah. No, 100%. And prove to me that I'm holding up the electrician. Because 9 times out of 10, if you go and speak to the electrician, then the electrician says, no, you're not holding me up at all. It's true, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. See, getting it from the horse's mouth is always hard because they tell you how it is.
Just a kind of a curveball for you, because we like to do that. What's wrong with construction?
I could answer that in one word: understanding.
A lack of understanding, or
I'd say understanding. I've been fortunate that I've been involved in a lot of developments, negotiations of developments of about £2 billion in London, just as a figure. If you went through the whole contractual matrix, you start off a project with a client, an employer. He has an idea, or they have an idea. They then buy the site or the project, the building. Then they go get a funder. Then they negotiate a funding arrangement with the funder while they put a project, a scheme together for delivery. That process could probably take 2 years before you get planning. Then after that 2-year period, there's a figure that somebody can borrow against. That figure's then tendered on with the contractors. It probably takes another 18 months to get a contractor involved, or down to your preferred contractor. So there's probably 3.5 years there of a funding arrangement, which now doesn't necessarily align with the delivery of the project. But your contractor wouldn't necessarily be aware of this. And certainly his supply chain has no clue about the funding aspect of a project. So throughout the whole supply chain, there's a lack of understanding of what everybody's role is within that project.
It's an interesting context.
And how that money flows through, because nobody spends their own money on delivering projects. Everybody borrows. That's just seems to be the way it is.
It's like a gambling table, isn't it? Everybody's throwing their own money in and putting their own cards on the table, and then holding the cards close to themselves.
Yeah.
There isn't an open transparency, is what I'm saying, in terms of the overall commercial project, in terms of the money that's involved. Everybody's trying to take a piece out of it, which is, they're all working against each other in that case.
Yeah, someone said to me, there's a pie of money, and how that gets apportioned just changes on every project. And that's your funding arrangement.
Yeah.
But that's the only amount of money you're ever going to borrow. I mean, I was involved in a project, and there was agreements for lease and all this other stuff. By the time we got on site to deliver, the agreements for lease were outdated. The dates had gone, but nobody had picked this up. And I said, "Oh, hang on. Your substation can't be delivered on that date because we're only just starting on site around that date. You need to go back and renegotiate." But the stakeholders involved in that were so significant, because you've got your local authority, you've got another owner of a building, a future leaseholder, and you think of all those actors that nobody at project level understands all these dynamics going on. And then a funder sat over the top saying, "Well, why do you need to renegotiate that?" Well, because it's taken us so long to get into contract from just agreeing the scheme with the planners.
No, I definitely take your point. And I think this is a common theme, especially in your business, that I hear, is that nothing is absolute. There's nothing in construction, you can't tie things down to an exact way of things, or a way of what the way things operate. No one contract is the same. You can put all the contracts you want in place, but as you said, there's so many external factors and internal factors that are working against each other. You can kind of take a good shot at it, but everybody needs to be of the understanding that, if all boats are going to float at the same time, if communication and coordination and open and transparency dialogue is not happening, then the project's going to be at risk in some way, shape or format. And trust and honour needs to be on the way in, and not, something that you hope might be on the table when things go wrong, because people tend to lock up and step back when the shit hits the fan.
Run away. Not my problem. So it's the blame culture, and it's an awful word, because everything that I see that's being done in construction it's all positive. It's creating spaces for people to live. It's creating opportunities for new jobs. It's developing industry. It's advancing sciences. The list goes on.
Yeah.
So that it's all positive at the sharp end, if you like. But then the internal politics you have through a project with all the stakeholders, we seem to be focusing on the negative throughout the project delivery, rather than looking at the bigger picture of what we're actually aiming to achieve. And then we look to blame throughout, which is such a shame.
Yeah. A couple of curveballs for you, Guy, before we let you go, if you're okay with that.
Yeah.
So, knowing what you know now, what would you do different? It can be business or it can be personal. And don't give us something that might get us all locked up.
I'd have probably taken an earlier interest in construction law than when I did. I was of the opinion that, and I've got some grey hair now, and I'm losing hair, that you had to be a seasoned professional in construction to really be able to understand the intricacies of the contracts and how they sort of fit together, the jigsaw of those. So I'd probably taken more of a lead on that at an earlier stage, because I don't think you need to be experienced, because insofar as you don't need the 10 years experience, the 15 years experience to be in a position to pick up a contract. Because with that brings some prejudice, I think, on project delivery, and that's just through your experience.
Very good.
Which then you have to remove when you try and become, an independent.
Well said. Something of interest of you that not many people would say, which is I didn't know about that. I never heard about that with Guy. Something that not many people would resonate with you.
Well, most people in my circle would know that I played a bit of football back in the day. But what probably most people will not know is that I trained as a chef out of school.
Wow.
Yeah. Very
good. And fully trained up?
Nearly.
Who did you play football for?
A team called Garforth Town and Tadcaster Albion. Yeah. And I played for Solihull Moors for a little bit as well.
Very good. Favourite holiday destination, Guy, and why?
Florida. Because the sun tends to shine and there's a positive attitude.
Yeah, especially around the January period. If you can get away around December, January, we like to get away. It's definitely in around December, January. Number one, because it's difficult to face back into the new year. You're kind of going like, I just want to get an extended break. I don't know if you do that yourself, do you?
Yeah, it depends how Christmas has gone, I suppose.
Yeah. A favourite book that it could be fiction or business, or a movie. It could be a movie if you want, but I'll let you decide.
There's so many, but there is a particular book that my partner reminded me of, which I love, and it's called Let My People Go Surfing. And it's by the guy who created Patagonia, Yvon Chouinard, and he's all about creating the best products to solve situations that he encounters, such as rock climbing equipment or whatever. But whenever they're developing products as a company, they want to cause the least disruption to the environment. So they're trying to create products in a really sustainable way. And that was back in the 70s.
Brilliant.
So it was really, really forward thinking in terms of sustainability. And one of the things that where the book title comes from, somebody just wanted to go surfing. He said, go surfing. They just wanted to take the surfboard and go and surf. And it's not a problem. It wasn't a 9-to-5 existence.
Yeah.
And it created a culture of everybody wanting to work within a business that wanted you to be successful. It gave you the opportunity to be successful, and it gave you the opportunity to do the best work you could.
Brilliant. I love that. I'm actually going to pick that up over the Christmas period. Sounds great.
It's a fantastic book.
Guy, if people want to get in touch with you, how do they do it? What's the best way? Like, I know, what's the website for the company? It's your own business, obviously. Yep.
So it's overford.com, overford.com. And my email address is guy.jackson guy@overford.com.
Yeah, well, we'll put it in the show notes, and obviously you're strong on LinkedIn as well. So Guy Jackson on LinkedIn.
Yeah, might get sick of seeing me.
Guy, listen, it's an absolute pleasure. And thanks very much for giving us some of your insights in terms of helping people to navigate those risks. And it's a sobering time at the moment with that company, that whale that went. But hopefully people can take something from today's discussion. And well done you. Keep doing what you're doing. And we wish you the best, and hopefully you come back again in the future.
Thanks for having me. I enjoyed it.
Thanks, Guy.